When a father and son set out for a cave diving trip, they never anticipate the disaster that will soon unfold. A frantic struggle to escape leads to a heartbreaking outcome. This is the tragic account of the Manatee Springs catastrophe. As always, viewer discretion is advised. On March 14, 2022, two friends, Sam and Henry, set out to test their cave diving abilities in the Manatee Springs cave system. Both had been diving together for years and had recently earned their intro to cave diving certification. For this particular trip, they decided to bring their fathers along for an adventurous dive in Florida. Manatee Springs was a popular diving location featuring a crystal-clear, spring-fed pool that was ideal for open-water divers. The cave system had three primary sinkhole entrances: Catfish Hotel, Sioux Sink, and Freedman's Sink, where the surface had collapsed long ago, forming open pools that led down into the submerged tunnels. The cave extended for thousands of feet, but only its endpoints had accessible entrances for divers. This underwater system functioned as a siphon, with water flowing like a river from a distant source and emerging as a natural spring at the main Manatee Spring. Because of this continuous flow, cave divers typically entered at one location and exited downstream at another. This style of diving, known as a traverse, posed additional risks since divers needed to navigate two distinct routes instead of just one. One of the biggest challenges of navigating an unfamiliar cave is that the tunnels rarely match what they look like on a map. The simple line drawings that divers rely on don't fully capture the complexity of the ceilings, walls, false exits, and branching pathways. What appears to be a clear opening from a guide map might, in reality, be a narrow passage obstructed by rock formations. For this reason, it takes an experienced diver to guide someone through on their first attempt, pointing out key landmarks and potential hazards. At Manatee Springs State Park, divers are required to have full cave diving certification and must be accompanied by someone with prior experience in the system before entering the cave portion of the springs. Despite this, the group was eager to take on the challenge. All four divers held an Intro to Cave Diving certification, meaning they had completed the first half of their training and were now gaining experience before attempting full certification. While this was a solid approach, it also put them in a risky position, still in training, but with just enough skill to push beyond their limits. The temptation to exceed one's certification level can be difficult to resist. The group had watched several YouTube videos detailing the route through the Manatee Springs cave system, which fueled their excitement. Unfortunately, this entire cave system was classified beyond their level of certification. Both siphon diving and traversing were reserved for fully certified cave divers. However, Sam and his father, Robert, along with Henry and his father, John, were about to push their limits, attempting their first traverse dive in a siphon. Their greatest concern was unintentionally reaching the exit at Manatee Springs. Over the years, this section of the cave system had developed a reputation for being hazardous, especially when the water flow was strong. The powerful siphon acted like an unstoppable force, pulling divers toward the exit with no way to turn back. Many described the current as feeling like a fire hose. Thrilling for experienced divers, but potentially dangerous. The exit hole itself was small and could sometimes become even more constricted due to shifting sediment or falling debris from above. Just 3 years earlier, in 2019, a tragic accident had underscored the dangers of this siphon. Zhou Min, a highly experienced and fully certified cave diver from China, lost her life after being caught in the powerful current. She was pushed into the exit hole with such force that she became completely trapped. Despite desperate rescue efforts, she could not be freed. With this in mind, the group planned to exit the cave system well before reaching the tight passage at the main spring. Manatee Springs had clear warning signs at its sinkhole swimming areas, cautioning divers against venturing beyond the open water zones. Cave diving required specialized training, with multiple levels of advanced certification needed before attempting a siphon traverse. But even with extensive training, there were no guarantees of safety in an environment as unforgiving as this. Robert, Sam, John, and Henry were fully suited up and ready for their dive, equipped with side-mounted air tanks. Each of them carried 2 tanks, filled to 3,800 pounds per square inch, more than enough for their planned dive. However, at a depth of 100 feet, the water pressure would reach 4 atmospheres, meaning the air in their tanks would be compressed to a quarter of its original volume and consumed 4 times faster than at the surface. They were well prepared, carrying both primary and backup light sources, along with dive computers to monitor their depth, heart rate, movement, and elapsed time. Both fathers also brought cameras fitted with large floodlights to capture footage of the dive. Their equipment was top of the line, their planning meticulous, but nothing could have prepared them for what lay ahead inside the deceptively treacherous cave. At 11:17 a.m., Sam and Henry took the lead, with their fathers following closely behind as they descended into the entrance at Friedman's Sink. This was a popular starting point for a traverse dive, as the current naturally carried divers through the system, first to Sioux Sink, then to Catfish Hotel, before ultimately reaching the main Manatee Spring. The gentle flow of water helped propel them forward, reducing their exertion as they traveled the 1,700 feet between Friedman's Sink and their planned exit at Catfish Hotel. The first 975 feet of the dive went smoothly. They reached the line leading to Sioux Sink's exit, which was tied off to a rock on the side, blending subtly into the environment. This particular exit was mostly used for emergencies, as the area above was a campground rather than a designated dive site. A faint glow of light filtered down from the surface, but they ignored it, knowing their next landmark, Catfish Hotel, was just over 700 feet ahead. They were making good time and conserving air, growing more confident as they navigated the siphon. Then suddenly, Sam reached the end of the main guideline. It just stopped. They hadn't seen the line leading up to Catfish Hotel, and the abrupt ending was baffling. One by one, the others caught up, all scanning the tunnel for any sign they had missed something. John swam up toward the ceiling, searching for a glimmer of light that might indicate the exit, but there was nothing. He dared not move more than a body length away from the main line, knowing the risks of venturing untethered in a cave system. A wave of unease washed over them. Something wasn't right. They weren't sure where they were. Robert pulled out his wet notes and scribbled a single word. Manatee? Had they overshot their exit entirely? Had they unknowingly reached the final chamber, where the powerful siphon could pull them into the dangerously tight exit hole leading to Manatee Spring? The realization hit them all at once. They might be in serious trouble. The father-son pairs, realizing their plan had fallen apart, decided to turn back together. They either missed the turnoff to Catfish Hotel or mistook it for Sioux's Sink. Either way, they wouldn't continue without a guideline, and the nearest known exit was behind them. Robert checked his air. 3,000 psi remained, so there was no immediate danger, but an unsettling feeling crept in. All they had to do was follow the line back. Simple enough, right? But in cave diving, nothing is ever simple. A straightforward task can quickly become an overwhelming challenge. Robert and Sam took the lead, with Robert switching off his video camera to focus entirely on the precarious journey back. The moment they began their return, they were met with an unexpected force. The water that had been calm and manageable before was now pushing against them with unrelenting turbulence. Their route was only 737 feet if they had gauged their location correctly. Robert put his head down and pulled himself forward, hand over hand. His heart pounded at 175 beats per minute, his breath rate tripling as the reality of their predicament sank in. The exertion was rapidly depleting their air supply, far faster than anticipated. Each diver's consumption rate depended on multiple factors: their breathing patterns, physical fitness, experience, and stress levels. John and Henry followed, able to see the lights of the divers ahead, though the murky water limited visibility. The winding tunnel blocked their view at times, leaving them unable to always confirm the presence of the others. John had his camera's floodlight on, hoping to illuminate the way, but it might have been the mistake that sealed their fate. Sam kept his eyes on the guideline, searching desperately for the tie-off that would mark the nearest exit. His panic grew. By now, they should have reached it. He pulled harder, his breath coming in ragged gasps, when suddenly the faint glow of daylight emerged ahead. The relief was overwhelming, yet sickening at the same time. The exit was there, They just needed to reach it. Sam moved forward, maneuvering around a few rocks that partially obstructed the passage leading to the surface at Sue's sink. Robert had been battling the fear that they would run out of air. The sheer physical demand of fighting the current had burned through his supply at an alarming rate. Seeing Sam signal that they had reached an exit brought a wave of relief. He quickly motioned to Henry, indicating the jump line that led upward. The sight of John's camera light in the distance reassured him. They would all have a harrowing story to tell once this was over. John kept his floodlight pointed forward, straining to catch sight of the exit rope. The current fought against him as he watched his son's fins just ahead. He felt the panic rising. He needed Henry to move faster. Urging him on, he pushed against his son's legs to signal him forward. Both knew that this extra effort was consuming their air reserves faster than expected, but they had planned for excess air and were confident they had enough to reach safety. Henry pulled himself forward at increasing speed. His father's insistence on hurrying was nerve-wracking. He needed to spot the exit rope, but he also had to move as quickly as possible. They should have reached the exit by now, yet there was no sign of Robert and Sam. Panic fully took hold. If they had missed the turnoff to Fredman's, they would be heading deeper into the abyss, a never-ending tunnel with no way out. He yanked on the line, his father's occasional tugs on his legs reinforcing the urgency. What neither of them knew was that John's floodlight was washing out the faint glow from the exit. The upline was hidden behind some rocks when viewed from this direction, and they never even saw it. Meanwhile, Robert and Sam broke the surface at Sue's sink at exactly noon. The pond was unfamiliar, but they were overwhelmed with gratitude to be breathing fresh air again, free of the cavern's grip. Minutes passed, then more, but their friends never emerged. It should have only taken a few minutes for them to follow. Sam debated diving back down, but Robert insisted they leave the water and call for help. With their air nearly gone, they would be of no use. They needed fresh divers with full tanks to help. For Henry and John, 20 agonizing minutes passed in a desperate, chaotic effort to locate an exit. Each promising opening in the ceiling raised their hopes, only for disappointment to crush them again. Henry's panic was uncontrollable when he finally caught sight of the glow from Fredman's sink. He rushed forward, found the upline, and glanced back, relieved to see his father's camera light. The fight for survival was almost over. Bursting through the surface, Henry inhaled sharply, trying to process what had gone wrong. Where were the other exits? How had they missed them? He wanted to talk to his father about it, but John was taking too long to follow. It was 12:20. They had been in the water for just over an hour. Henry checked his pressure gauge. One tank was completely drained, and the other held just 1,500 psi. He had barely made it out, and he was smaller and in better shape than his father. He waited. A minute passed, then another. No air bubbles rose from below. Panic set in. His father must have run out of air. Robert and Sam had already made their way to Fredman's sink, anxiously hoping their friends had surfaced there. The three could do nothing but wait, questioning where they had gone wrong. What they didn't realize was that there was no line leading up to Catfish Hotel from that depth. From below, the light from the sinkhole was invisible. Divers had to ascend through a hole in the ceiling, move forward 10 feet, then ascend again to reach Catfish Hotel. Without prior knowledge, they had no way of knowing this. At 12:50, the first qualified rescue divers arrived. Soon after, 2 members of the International Underwater Cave Rescue and Recovery Team joined them. It wasn't long before they found John's lifeless body, just 100 feet from the exit at Fredman's sink. His tanks were completely empty. He had traveled 3,400 feet through the cave system only to run out of air in the final 100 feet. The realization was devastating. His final recorded movements were at 12:17, just 3 minutes before Henry surfaced and 17 minutes after Robert and Sam reached Sue's sink. When Henry had looked back and seen his father's light, John had likely already been struggling for his last breaths. Or worse, he was already gone. Despite their preparation and training, the cave had claimed another life. It was yet another tragic reminder of the dangers of cave diving. Full certification, rigorous practice, and diving with experienced teams are critical, but even then, unforeseen risks remain. Many expert divers have lost their lives to the unforgiving depths.